My spouse Jessica betrayed the foundation of our relationship on a despicable lie, yet expects me to simply forgive and forget. We attended her sister Alyssa's wedding recently, and right before the ceremony, Jessica pulled me aside to talk privately. She made me vow not to get angry, then dropped a bombshell. 4 years ago while we were dating, she had an affair with the groom's best man, Kyle. She wanted me to remain respectful towards him when I inevitably crossed paths with the snake. Apparently, her infidelity was no big deal according to her, just a fling she hoped I could overlook and let go. Before I could even respond, she abruptly left me standing there and went back inside. I was absolutely devastated, but froze in stunned silence initially. After a few minutes of gathering my wits, I went to grab a quick lunch, intending to meet Jessica at the church. As I ate and scrolled through my phone in a daze, the revelation began gnawing away at me relentlessly. As much as I tried dismissing it, the anguish only intensified. I forced myself to attend the wedding ceremony and reception, sitting alone and observing everything through an emotionally shattered lens. Jessica finally arrived at the reception and joined me. Not wishing to create a scene and detract from her sister's special day, I decided to temporarily bite my tongue on the matter. But then Jessica gleefully informed me that the wedding party would be doing a choreographed dance, and she would be paired up with the best man Kyle for it. When I questioned why, since he clearly wasn't her counterpart in the wedding party, she explained that the maid of honor and her partner were actually married, so they wanted to dance together instead. At this point, I was seething with repressed rage, but managed to keep my composure outwardly. Thankfully, I had the wisdom not to consume any alcohol, as I'm well aware that I can become belligerent when inebriated and angry. Jessica socialized jovially with those around us, until the dreaded dance number arrived. Kyle came over and offered his arm to my traitorous wife, which she accepted without a second thought. I averted my gaze, unwilling to watch the intimate display play out. Afterwards, Jessica returned to our table with the snake in tow, and they carried on like the oldest of pals, laughingly reminiscing about previous dalliances and inside jokes from their sordid history together. With every passing minute, my blood boiled hotter. Eventually, I had to excuse myself to the restroom before doing something rash I'd regret. When I returned, Kyle had mercifully departed, but Jessica was incensed that I had been rude towards her former lover. I curtly informed her that we would discuss her abhorrent indiscretion later, as her sister's wedding was neither the proper time nor place for such a heavy confrontation. Jessica claimed I had already ruined her day, and she didn't want me souring her sister's joyous celebration as well, so we would be leaving the reception early. She lambasted me for being disrespectful towards Kyle, despite her previous demand for cordiality. What did she expect after the gut punch of a revelation? We did indeed depart prematurely, with Jessica arriving home a short while after me. I was seated in the living room, awaiting her return to finally address the elephant in the room head-on. Wasting no time on niceties, I demanded she recount every sordid detail about her fling with Kyle, to which she parroted the same story nearly verbatim as earlier. After letting her words hang heavy in tense silence for a few moments, I reminded her that we had already been a committed couple for over a year when her indiscretion occurred. Her nonchalant response floored me. Instead of becoming flustered or remorseful, she simply stated, "I know," with an unsettling calmness. When I pressed for her rationale, Jessica explained that she and Kyle were co-workers at the time, and their affair was strictly physical with no deeper emotional intimacy. She claimed we were going through a rough patch back then, so she viewed it as harmless fun for a few weekends to meet some unfulfilled need. Jessica acknowledged that revealing her past indiscretion now was likely an error, but she didn't want me to be blindsided if Kyle continued appearing at future family functions. Her justifications enraged me. She took zero accountability, felt no remorse or guilt over her actions, viewed our relationship as disposable back then, and assumed informing me of her betrayal wouldn't adversely impact our marriage in any profound way. I didn't react as dispassionately as she expected. We had an explosive argument where she arrogantly doubled down on her casual stance, claiming since it occurred prior to our legal marriage vows, ancient history from when we were different people, it shouldn't affect me or our present relationship dynamic. Essentially, she viewed her unfaithful acts while we were merely dating as inconsequential due to lack of official marital commitments. I vehemently disagree. Her deception represented a monumental breach of trust, with lasting impact on my perception of her and our future together. The fact she lacked any shred of remorse over emotionally eviscerating me compounded the pain tenfold. Her pique infuriated me, flippantly dismissing my anguish as childish for not simply getting over it already. I revel when Jessica talks down to me in such a condescending manner, an attempt to assert some illusory moral superiority. Before storming off, I emphasized needing more time and space to process this emotional maelstrom, to which she argued no further reflection was required. Her revisionist history claimed her indiscretions held zero relevance, and I should ignore the undeniable impact on our committed relationship. It's been 2 weeks, yet the shockwaves still ripple powerfully through me. Despite Jessica's misguided pleas for reconciliation, I can no longer perceive her as the paragon of virtue and loyalty I had pedestalized mere weeks ago. The immense breach of trust has irrevocably shattered my idealized impression of her moral fortitude. When she kisses me departure each morning, my stomach no longer flutters with affection, only lurching queasily. I ache for the blissful ignorance of how things once were, when I could gaze upon her with pure, untainted adoration. Our relationship dynamic has shifted irreparably. I'm now hyper-aware that she's capable of calculated deception without a shred of guilt or remorse, a harsh reality from which I can't simply revert back. For the first time, deliberating whether to salvage our marriage or permanently sever ties. Update: recent developments have only muddied the waters further, compounding my difficulty in arriving at a clear decision. Initially, my predominant emotion was unbridled rage at Jessica's earth-shattering deceit. But as that dissipated over last weekend, melancholy anguish set in over the potential demise of what I believed was an immaculate, beautiful relationship. Jessica eventually recognized the gravity of her indiscretion that could legitimately precipitate the dissolution of our marriage. This grim realization triggered an acute anxiety attack so severe it necessitated an ER visit and overnight hospital stay to get her stabilized on anti-anxiety medication. Her panic understandably alarmed her family, who inserted themselves into the deeply personal matter. Upon returning home with them in tow, Jessica confided in me her desperate desire to mend our fractured relationship and pleaded with me to engage her openly and honestly. She wished to spend time alone with her mother to process everything, which afforded me some welcome solitude to collect my own thoughts at work for a couple hours. However, Jessica's emotional state quickly devolved again, causing her to frantically summon me home via text, begging me to talk things through with complete transparency before it was too late. When I arrived back at the house, I was surprised to find Jessica's father lingering on the porch, requesting a private word with me. Fully expecting to be chastised or guilt-tripped over consideration of divorce, I braced myself for an onslaught of rage. Instead, he utterly disarmed me by taking full accountability for Jessica's skewed perspectives on committed relationships. He admitted to catastrophically failing as a parent by instilling a toxic mindset that her mother had indoctrinated their daughters with the misguided belief that prior indiscretions before legal marriage didn't truly count or tarnish the sanctity of the eventual union. Her father understood the roots of Jessica's nonchalant attitude now, stemming from her dysfunctional upbringing and misguided moral education under his passive watch. He sorrowfully lamented enabling this ethical fallacy to germinate by not intervening when his wife diminished the importance of fidelity and affirmed that Jessica's actions were indefensible. However, he wanted me to understand the root cause behind her fundamentally flawed principles. Her father concluded by stating that while he still loved Jessica dearly, he stood by me regardless of whichever difficult decision I ultimately made: rebuild our marriage from this rubble, or sever ties permanently. His words held immense validation, and I felt a profound sense of respect for his objectivity amidst such a personal family crisis. After her parents departed, I found Jessica curled up in a fragile, sobbing ball on the couch. We embraced for what felt like an eternity, her apologizing profusely through choked gasps as the floodgates opened. In that moment, I remembered the woman I had fallen so deeply in love with, initially flawed yet inherently good-natured, even if she had strayed from her moral foundations temporarily. I know reconciling represented the easier, weaker option after her anguished pleas for forgiveness. But I have to own my role in enabling this dysfunction as well, for pedestalizing Jessica so immensely that I refused to believe she could ever intentionally betray me so profoundly. We had both constructed the facade of an immaculate, infallible relationship. When that illusion shattered into a million fragments, the only path forward required brutal honesty and radical transparency to rebuild anything resembling trust and intimacy. Once Jessica regained her composure, I requested she divulge every sordid detail of her indiscretions for full catharsis. I wished I could unburn the graphic imagery from my mind, but realized I needed to confront those demons to move forward, one way or another. She disclosed the precise time frame, roughly 6 months after we had been officially exclusive. Jessica explained it initially started with some inappropriate flirting and emotional infidelity with her coworker Kyle, which escalated into a clandestine sexual affair spanning 3 to 4 months before their fling mercifully combusted. The most difficult admission was her recounting exactly how frequent and severe the physical betrayals had become, not just a random weekend rendezvous, but repeated dalliances consuming their workplace affairs. While I certainly didn't want every gratuitous detail burnt into my psyche, I had to resist flinching or becoming outwardly judgmental as Jessica purged with surprising candor. As brutally painful as it was to confront those truths, she deserved immense credit for maintaining her composure and not succumbing to trickle truth or deceitful minimizations. When pushed on her motivations, Jessica confessed to a combination of resentment towards me during that rocky period of our relationship, arrogant overconfidence that she could conceal the fling indefinitely, and a thirst for ego-stroking validation from Kyle's relentless attention. However, she vehemently denied any stronger romantic intimacy, simply a protracted lapse in judgment and impulse control, devoid of emotional investments beyond the tawdry exterior thrills. While I could accept her stated reasonings nominally, her apparent absence of guilt still confounded me. How could someone be so ethically rudderless and disconnected from fundamental concepts of committed relationships? Jessica acknowledged carrying remorse for the indiscretion itself shortly after terminating the affair, but admitted it faded quickly into the rearview mirror without my knowledge, essentially greasing the slope for further betrayal by minimizing the infraction's significance over time. We discussed her delayed confession at length. She claimed prioritizing honesty and preventing future ambushes around Kyle at family events, not some epiphanic moral awakening, as her primary motivation. Jessica recognized how precarious our situation had become, teetering on the precipice of marital dissolution. But she remained adamant that her feelings towards me had never wavered. Her commitment to our future together is resolute, and she viewed the person who committed those indiscretions as someone she no longer recognized. After an emotional deluge unlike anything I'd ever experienced, I found myself completely adrift at sea, with no lighthouse piercing the dense fog surrounding us. I knew Jessica's acknowledgement that the betrayal could jeopardize our marriage represented massive progress from her previous nonchalant stance, but her inability to articulate deeper remorse over the immense pain she had inflicted created this uneasy stalemate where I couldn't simply pretend to move forward unimpeded. While I desperately wanted to accept Jessica's plea to rebuild from this nadir, actually forgiving and forgetting felt like an impossibility. The permanent stain on our relationship dynamic couldn't just be wished away through sheer force of will. Too much damage had been done, too many images branded into my psyche that could never be forgotten or unlearned. Every time I looked at Jessica, I no longer saw the infallible, unimpeachable woman to whom I had remained permanently devoted through a half-decade of blissful commitment. Instead, her shining halo had been irrevocably shattered, replaced by the unflattering, desaturated portrait of a flawed, insecure person rationalizing unethical behavior through the warped lens of self-absorbed hedonism and moral relativism. Could I somehow regain that preternatural trust, unwavering fidelity, and reverential pedestalization which proved so tragically misplaced? More importantly, should I even try resuscitating the foolish naivete which allowed me to remain so oblivious to Jessica's compounded deceptions for years after the fact? Perhaps the healthiest path forward involved accepting the inherent flaws and gray areas within our spouses, thereby protecting ourselves from emotionally shattering future blindsides of this magnitude. Of course, the other obvious consideration centered on Jessica's apparent inability or unwillingness to properly contextualize the grievous betrayal within our relationship's history. While she acknowledged regret over the inciting indiscretion, her account continually diminished its significance through minimizing relativism, always couching it as strictly physical, spontaneous lapses devoid of romantic intentions, confined to a narrow time frame before our life-altering marriage commitment. How could she be so obtuse about the lasting ramifications of a protracted sexual affair upon an otherwise monogamous, emotionally intimate relationship? Where was her moral compass, her ethical foundation as a committed partner who understood concepts like loyalty, honesty, accountability beyond merely checking legalistic boxes? Perhaps the most disturbing realization involved Jessica's ingrained mindset being an inevitable byproduct of her formative upbringing and moral education under her fundamentally misguided parents. If their relativistic messaging condoned extramarital affairs as long as they remained confined to an arbitrary period before walking down the aisle, how could I expect her to comprehend the true gravity of her deceit through any other lens? Our belief systems and personal ethics originate as saplings from the soil in which we're rooted. Jessica may have simply remained entrenched within the unhealthy permissiveness those seeds took root in long ago. Despite all the agony she had inflicted upon me through premeditated deception and shameless rationalization, a part of my soul couldn't help remaining devoted to the woman with whom I had fallen so deeply in love. I was reminded of a poignant quote about the emotional paradox of being hopelessly in love, yet devastatingly betrayed. How amazing that it's possible to miss someone so completely and be done with them so entirely all at once. That profoundly resonated. While so many components of my mind and logic center demanded cutting her from my life completely to preserve my dignity and self-respect, my heart fought valiantly to remain open to manifesting some path towards reconciliation. Perhaps that alone represented progress from the past few weeks, being able to calmly contemplate forgiveness instead of immediately dismissing the mere notion out of hand. In the end, no resolution felt perfectly satisfying. Rebuilding our marriage would necessitate immense vulnerability, frustration, and continually revisiting excruciating emotional triggers as Jessica worked towards earning back the trust she had decimated. Yet conscious uncoupling wouldn't provide some panacea either. I knew lingering what if surrounding our history together would always gnaw away, combining with vengeful thoughts about the life Jessica seemed so eager to discard during her selfish fling. All I could commit to was remaining open, continuing our brutally honest dialogue, and hoping the path forward slowly revealed itself over time, like rising above the clouds after ascending through dense fog. For now, existing in permanent limbo represented its own personalized purgatory where I had no choice but to introspect deeply about what path could lead towards inner peace and lasting fulfillment, whatever that ultimately entailed.